Hi, folks, and welcome back to Ninja Bunny Crafts. This is episode 2, and today we're going to be talking about something. If you're going to be making miniature terrain, you're more than likely going to have some form of mini to place on it. And that helps bring the game to life, and it helps the players visualize things more clearly. Seeing a monster or a group of minions on the board being routed by the minis represented by the player characters, it's an amazing feeling. However, a gray, green, or red unpainted mini, well, perfectly fine. It's a little boring. And it's 100% acceptable to have those. Don't feel like you need this. But it's fun to paint a mini. So today, I'm going to show you how to get a quick and effective paint job on your miniatures. Like this guy right here. He's not focusing well. Let's see. There we go. Now it's focusing. Now, the method I'm going to show you today is great for painting multiples. I didn't do multiples in the video, and I probably should have, since, this really does help, especially if ADHD like I do, and waiting for paint to dry can drive you insane. This is pretty fun. I like to call it like my speed painting. I think other people call it slap chopping. I'm not sure the multiple words. I just call it speed painting. So, right now I want to cover a couple of facts. And these facts are usually things that deter people from painting miniatures. 1. You can use craft paints. You do not need specialized hobby paints in order to paint a mini. There are some downfalls to using your acrylic craft paints, but that's just how it is with anything. You do have to water them down a little bit more. It will take more covering, more layers of paint to do it. And there's reasons most of us don't use craft paints, and it's nothing major. It's just, well, let me explain it a little bit better. So a craft paint has pigments in its color, and they are, ironically for once, bigger is not better here. The craft paint's pigments are much larger than a hobby paint, so when they get watered down, they lose a lot of color and vibrancy, where craft paints tend to have very small pigments for their coloring, and it lets them get watered down so they can go over the mini and not have streaks or anything like that. A little bit smoother. Everything requires at least 2 coats. Me personally, I use a very specialized paint, and I'm going to show you right now. I use, oh God, don't knock everything over. I did. Oh no. I use Golden Sulfates. Now, these are not a hobby paint, believe it or not. These are actually for canvas painting, but they have an extremely high and very small pigment to it. So the pigment count is extremely high, and they're very, very tiny. So you can water it down to an extreme amount, which, with the particular technique I'm using, really helps. So, second part, priming your mini. This is an optional step, but I highly recommend it. For the particular style we're going to be using today, you are going to want to prime it or do a black undercoat for it. And the third fact I want to get to, and this is the one that everyone seems to just think is the weirdest fact, anyone can paint a mini. You do not need to be a professional. You don't need years of training. All you need is somebody to show you a couple of techniques, and you're on to it. So let's get to the first step. All right, so this first step is a surprisingly important one for those of us that did not 3D print our mini, okay? So, if you have a mini that you bought from WizKids, Reaper's Bones, or if you're like me here using an old Hero Quest mini from the 80s and 90s Heroes Quest, you're going to want to wash your mini. Now, I'd already done this, so the process here is very laxed on my part, but be thorough. I will usually use regular soap and soak them and give them a good scrub. You want to do this because there's a powder that they put on these guys, because most of these guys are mold injected minis, and that powder lets them get out of the mold. However, it will stop primer and paint from sticking. So I lead by example, and I show you guys me washing mine because I'm telling you, you should wash yours. Now there's many ways to prime your Mini. Today I'm going to be using a spray can to prime mine. Priming your Mini is very helpful for you in many ways, and in this case it will help the paint stick to the Mini, obviously. And because we're doing black, it is a very important part of our process and what we're doing. Now, I shouldn't have to say this, but I am because there are people that need to hear it. If you're going to use a spray can, please do it outside or in a well-ventilated area. Once the primer is dried completely, you're going to want to move on to the dry brushing step. This is going to help you create shadows, light, and depth quickly once the color is starting to be applied. Now, you're going to grab some double-sided tape or some sticky tack or poster tack, and you're going to want to grab something you can use as a handle. I'm using an acrylic paint container here for mine. Give you a good stick here. And unfortunately, as good as I thought this was, it's going to fall off several times in the video here, so you're going to get a good laugh at me every time I go to try and get this done. A couple of times my Mini is just going to fall off my handle there. So make sure you use plenty of good amount of sticky tack or good sticky double-sided tape. That's not just going to fall off on you while you're doing your work there. So once you've got your brush loaded up with a bunch of paint and you've got it removed as best you can, as you can see here, I'm using a mini brush here for minis, but you don't need to. Okay, go to the dollar store or something, get a cheap makeup brush set, and just get the smaller brush to do this so that you can get in those areas. Now, normally you'll want to start at the top half and work your way down. You want your top half to have the heavier amount of dry brushing on it because light usually shines from above and down. It's gonna make the shadows a little bit nicer and better there. You're going to look at the lower half still. You're going to give it a dry brushing, but you're going to focus on it a little less heavy here. Make sure you're fully loaded on your brush here too. This was a mistake I made as I started this part of the video. I didn't load up my brush with enough paint before doing my dry brushing process. Just, all over my paper towel there, and it backfired, bit me in the butt, so to speak. I went back to my little paint lid there and filled it up. As I said at the beginning of the video, you can see I am using Golden So Flat acrylic paints. They are a little bit expensive, but again, given their pigment count and the size of the pigment, I spent $10 per bottle that I have there at a Michael's craft store, and I have gotten already 30-40 minis painted with the bottles I have, and it's just amazing stuff. And no, they aren't paying me to say this stuff. They intend this stuff for canvas painters, not miniature painters. So I came across these by accident, just ironically perusing YouTube, and I cannot remember the painter's name at the time. I think maybe it was Ninjon suggested these. He really liked them for a thing he was doing. They do have a limited amount of colors, so if you're going to use them, you're going to want to learn how to mix your colors, which is what I will do later in the video for the shoes on this guy. Now, one thing I love about this technique here is that because the dry brushing we're doing, it's going to give you a quick, fast job at doing layers and depth without you needing to do layers and depth. Normally you would start with a very dark undertone color and then work your way up to highlighting the areas, and then maybe a very thin light dry brushing to bring things out on a very high quality mini. But this technique, this is, hey, I've got 10 guys I just bought from WizKids or Reaper's Bones, or I just printed these guys out and I need to bang it out so I can get it on the table for the players to see. And this is the technique for you. This is just go. Now, I do know some speed painters and slap choppers that do an amazing job that just looks beautiful because they just add a few little highlights in here and there. But this is for the person just starting out that just wants to get 3 or 4 minis painted real quick in about 40 minutes or so. And that's about how long all that's going to really take you. Probably about 40, maybe 50 minutes. And that is, of course, with the dreaded, most hated thing for anyone that has, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder like myself, waiting. I absolutely abhor waiting. I love to paint my minis. God, I love it. See, I'm going to try and focus in here and show you what you should see, what the mini should look like. It is a little tricky getting used to the camera angle and doing things right here. But that's what you're going to want to see, how it just highlights all those higher areas and the lower areas stay in kind of darkness. That's what we're going to be looking for. All right, guys, it's time to move on to the meat and potatoes of things, and it's time to paint. Now, at this point, you need to get anything you can here. Again, Dollar Tree, Dollarama, whatever it is, great place to pick up these little plastic trays. And I water my paints down a lot, and that's what you're going to want to do. You want it to be almost transparent looking. It's a little hard to see because, again, as I was doing this, I didn't realize how bad the focus of the camera was. I apologize for this again. So you want to get that paint very thin here. Very, very thin. And then you're just going to add it on there. And what's going to happen is the areas you dry brushed, the white areas, they are going to make that color that you're adding, it just pop. It's going to make the highlighted areas look really well, and then it's going to gradually lose that color and go into darkness and shadow, which is what you want. This gives you the shadowing effect without you having to do a lot of work. And it's also, as I point out many times here, very useful for getting a lot of these guys done quickly. Now, I am speeding things up a little bit because, again, the process is about 40 minutes. And this would be doing multiples, but I'm like doing one, and I've got a fan off camera that I'm using to help me dry it a little bit quicker. But honestly, if you had multiples, it would still be about the same time at about 40 minutes to get everything said and done. Now, I'm doing a orc, like I said, and I'm doing them in that classic green orc kind of skin, just because this is a bad guy orc. It's a bad guy orc. He's not a good guy orc. He's a bad guy orc. So I want him to look like a comic bad guy, like the Minion bad guy. See if I can get the camera focus in here. A little bit behind the hand. See? Starting to create that shadow and that light depth. Now, again, I'm having that problem with the sticky tack here, and I am going to have it multiple times through this video. And I just keep going in. I keep going back, loading my brush up, and then I make sure my brush is a little wet, and I keep dragging it through. In this case, it's parchment paper, and I keep dragging it through till I start to see that the green is not dominating the white paper, where I can start to see the white paper through. And then I just gently go over and start brushing things in. And I start to just move along. Now, you can start anywhere you want. Some people would probably start with the shirt because that's the big area and it'd be a little bit easier. I'm weird. I like to start with skin on things. I don't know why. I like to start with the skin. I like to get that look of the skin coming through. And then it starts to feel like when you were a kid and you get black and white coloring books and you'd start to color them in. You'd be like, oh, wow, now it's starting to come to life. And that's kind of what it is for me here. I also find it very relaxing. I lose train of thought here. And unfortunately, because I'm painting like that, losing train of thought, I go off camera here a few times while painting the mini and then realize it shortly afterwards that I might be off camera. So, learning experience and learning curves as we go. So here we are, a little bit more onto it. I'm moving on to the arm here. And I'm trying to show the brightness of the arm and get that in there and avoid that little metal bangle or bracelet he's got. And it just starts to really come to life. It starts to look a whole different. It kind of reminds me of, I don't know, gritty 90s comic book that was done in color instead of black and white. And I'm constantly making sure it's really fun. Now, I'm hitting the other arm over here, and I kind of wish that, I know this was the 80s and 90s. I think Games Workshop helped do this back in the day. I'm not 100% sure. If you know about HeroQuest and the history of it, and can actually correct me there, please do. I played this game a lot as a kid. Just I can't remember who did what. So I come to a moment here where I'm looking at the mini and I keep having to readjust the sticky tack. As I said, it just not enough of it. I thought I put enough. I was sure if I wanted to do pants or exposed legs, and I'm like, you know what? I want that. I want that classic feel. I want that retro nostalgia feel. So I'm just gonna go with open legs instead of pants. We're gonna go with open legs instead of pants, and I don't regret this at all. I love this decision. I think that retro style and retro feel in miniatures like this is the whole point. It's give you those nostalgia vibes, give you that throwback vibe. There's no point to not do it. You might as well just jump in and do it. Right? And you can see that it just starts to bring everything to life. And it is really fun as you paint your miniature to watch it come to life. It's cathartic. I'm not sure if that's the right word. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But comment down below if I use the right word. So as it starts to come to life, you can do some things. I'm weird. I start to give a backstory. In this case, this guy here, he's your average everyday minion, but he really loves bitter beer. Just the worst tasting beer you can find. That skunky, horrible beer. He's that kind of minion. He really loves them. And his sword it's cringy, it's dingy, but he sharpens that edge. He keeps that edge nice and sharp. It definitely not his. He never bought it, never got it handed to him. He just kind of picked it up off a corpse one day when he joined the orc army, and he's like, "Yep, this'll do." And he's got a lazy eye. I like the idea of him having a lazy eye, so I will I will put a lazy eye on him here. I'll show you guys how to do that. But you don't have to. The technique I'm showing you, if you want to leave with no eyes, it'll work just fine because the shadows create that kind of area for the eyes and thus the effect that you're looking for. As you see, I move on to red here, and red is an interesting color to do with this technique because you can get it to where it looks dingy red by just doing a single pass. It's that weak, faded red. But I'm not going to go for that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let areas dry real quick, just enough, and then I'm going to do highlights on the ridges to really make the red pop. And you'll see that in the end result. So we're just going to try and get that. Again, I got to apologize, folks. I mean, I really get into this mini painting, and I don't realize that I'm going off camera. This might also have to do with, I'm working in a confined area, and I'm still getting used to the camera angles I can use. I've noticed that when I'm painting this at this point, I noticed that I did not get enough primer on the underside of the tunic. These old mold injection ones from the 80s and 90s, there's this huge underneath that's just a flat bottom underneath the end of the tunic. And I just realized that it didn't really have it when I was painting right here. So I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. It's the underneath. Who's going to be looking to see if he's wearing underwear? I think that'd be a little weird if you lifted it up to see if they had underwear. So here I'm going, and I'm trying to avoid hitting the back belt here too much because I want to try and keep that black look to the belt like it's shiny black leather. And you can see, again, how the technique we used of dry brushing it after priming it black has really helped the red pop out, and it's really created depth and shadow. Again, I've gone off camera, and I apologize because I haven't realized it yet. I'm just focused on this. And again, if you find an old mini and start painting it, or buy a mini and you start to paint it, you'll probably end up in that same moment of zen. I like to think of it as that. It's a very zen-like moment for me where I just get into this and I'm painting that backstory in my head for the character, even if it's just a miniature that's meant to be a random minion. I start to just fade into that kind of trance-like state, and I really enjoy the miniature paint. Now make sure that you're doing a good even coat. That's what I'm doing here. I'm making sure that I don't miss any area. It is thin. It is very transparent paint right now, but that's not an excuse to not cover your areas properly. Again, as I said, everything will require at least 2 coats because you want it very thinned down. You do not want it clumping up, causing streaks. You want it to be able to go into those grooves and those highlights very well and not leave any kind of awkward clump of or buildup of paint like if you didn't thin it down. And trust me, if you don't thin it down, you will see it in the final product. You little wobbly wobbly there. Here we go. Now we're going to try getting to the front of the thing. This is going to finally start to give us life to things, you know, that moment of wow. So I'm adding it again all around everywhere but the chainmail. So this open tunic like shirt here, I'm giving a bright red because I think red shirt, I think Star Trek, I think he's disposable, he's a minion. But again, as you paint it, you'll do like I did probably, or you don't. You know, if you don't, you don't. End up making like a little backstory in your head for the person. Like, his name's Jim. He likes fried fish, but not good fried fish. He likes the really stinky, like anchovies, fried with that bitter, horrible beer. Focus in here, hopefully. Focus in here, and you start to see what he looks like. Now, always clean your brush. I have 2 things of water down there. One is dirty water, and one is clean water. So give me a second here. All right, I used the magic of video editing, and I mixed up a little bit of green and red there to come up with a very dark brown, and I'm just putting that all over those shoes. The shoes didn't have much of a dry brush to them because, again, shadows and all that, but you still want to get them covered. You still want to follow the same method. You want those shoes there because, hey, people wear shoes. See? Didn't focus in there too well, but, you know, brown shoes. All right. I have 2 paints here for the metal. These are from Vallejo. It's Tinny Tin and Chainmail Silver. Now, metallic paints on their own these are craft paints, by the way, folks. You can use, they're not craft, these are hobbies. You can use craft paints here, but you have to water them down heavily and use several coats. This, I only dipped the brush in water so that I could get, you know, fluid moving. And they are very transparent, the hobby ones on their own. So you're going to need to do at least 2 coats, as always. And I'm starting out at the bottom of the chainmail here, just slowly working my way up to the top and then slowly working my way in there. And once I've got all the stuff I want in silver on the chainmail, I'm actually going to move up to the sword. See? He's nice and shiny. Look at him. He's starting to look like he's ready for combat. Now, let's just get this blade here in a nice silver. Now, because it is a black primered one with that dry brushing, it's going to create some weird, awesome, like, definition of the blade for you all on its own. And then you can come back later and highlight some areas if you want. You can even do a wash, which I'm going to do later, which will make it look dirty and dingy. And then come back over with this and put it right along the edge to give it like that look of a sharpened blade. So we're going to get it in there nice and good. We don't want any spots not hit because it will show. You will notice it when the light hits it just right. We're hitting the underside where it didn't have much of a dry brush effect take hold. But even then, I don't want you to pick this guy up and not notice it. And you shouldn't either. So let's check it over and make sure everything looks good. Now this stuff will dry fast because I did specifically buy the metal paints that were speed painting. So they dry very quickly for me. And I'm getting those second coats on very fast. Once I've got them all set here, I want to make sure that they're set well. I'm going to move over and I'm going to move on to the Tinny Tin for the little skull belt he has and some of the nodules on the bangle there. And I'm going to get that bangle painted up too. Now again,
If you're a regular person, this is okay. These little details, you'll be able to fly over them and not obsess. But if you have ADHD like me, you probably will end up obsessing over it. And the best thing I found so that I don't obsess is that I should do it very quickly. Remember that I'm going to use a wash over it that's going to make it look different. And I keep in mind that I'm going to add a little detail here in a moment when I start to do the tinny tin. Let's see if I can get the camera to focus in. And there he is. See? Clean your brush. Always clean your brush. You do not want paints to mix. And here we go. I'm going to get that tinny tin. I'm going to start out with that skull. I'm going to get down there and just start adding it to that skull because I like the tin look on that skull for the belt. However, I will cause a little mistake here that many of you might have, and I added too much. So I've got to get some of that excess paint off. So I've got a paper towel nearby, and I dry my brush completely and start wicking it away. What wicking it means is basically you'll just take the dry brush that's still slightly moist, and it'll suck off the excess paint, and then just wipe it away on a paper towel. Now I'll go in and refix everything, and like I said, I'm going to paint the handle here in tinny tin because I want a contrast of textures and color on the blade. And again, I said he picked this up from like a dead body or something, so they probably really liked this sword and had it, not with just a standard old steel or iron handle. This person probably had like a very fancy tin plating put on it or something. And this sword, he just found it. He found it and he took it, and it's his now. It's his now, and he doesn't care that it has a little bit of contrast of color. But if another orc tried to take it, man, there'd be a fight over it. So we're going to add a little bit there to the bottom of the blade handle there. Just these little details that really help you out. And adding little stories while you're doing the little details, it helps your mind. Maybe gets you into a little bit more. Maybe you're not a dungeon master like me. Maybe you're a player. And then it really like, I like this. Yeah, where he got this? Yeah, I know where he got this from like his aunt or his uncle or he stole this one day or any little story, and it helps you. Builds up that character background that you had a hard time figuring out maybe. Or maybe you didn't have a hard time. Maybe you've got everything figured out, and just running back over that background in your head as you're painting things is amazing. Now there are little nodules on the belt here that I'm putting little itty bitty dabs of tinny tin onto to just make them pop like they're little rivets on the belt. And I'm doing my best here. Luckily, my hand, when it comes to mini painting, it doesn't tremor too much, so I'm able to do things like that. But if you have a tremor, it's okay to rest that elbow or anything that helps, that wrist, anything on something else while you do it. And then you can be completely done right here if you want. But I'm not. I'm going to do another couple of things here because I really want things to pop. First off, I want to get eyes. Like I said, he's got a lazy eye. So how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to make one eye a little bit. I like red eyes on these guys, by the way, because they're bad guys. He's a bad guy. I want you to know he's a bad guy. I'm going to make one eye a very bright red, a little bit bigger dot. And then the other one here, I have a little bit harder time seeing this. My eyes start to go out of focus on me on this. So I do move over to my little magnifying glass so that I can get a little bit of a steadier look and give that weak little doop of red on the other eye. And it's a little hard to see, but that's the point. That other eye is the lazy eye. That's why it's so hard to see. It's so weak compared to the other eye. And now I'm going to give it a moment to dry. Thank you, Camera Magic, for that quick dry. And I'm going to use Vallejo washes here. I do like Vallejo. And no, they're not paying me. I wish they would. Hey, Vallejo, if you want to pay me. Anyway, I'm going to use their sepia brown and their black. I'm going to do a 3-to-1 ratio. 3 drops of sepia brown to 1 drop of black. And then I'm going to take in my case, I like to use these bushy brushes. And I'm just going to give it a little drop of water before I do everything like usual. And then I'm going to apply this wash to all the metallic and metal areas. And then I'm just going to very lightly do it around the belt so that it can help get the tinny tin a little grungy. And then I'm going to apply it to his boots because I'm like, he's been slogging around in the mud and stuff in an old old orc camp. So yeah, he should have some Grinch and grime and grook all over his belt. And once that's all said and done, wash your brush. Let it dry. I let it dry. Thank you, camera magic again. And I'm going to just take that. Remember I said about his blade being sharp? Well, I'm going to take a little bit of that chainmail silver again, and just along the edges of the blade, I'm going to give a few swoops and a few swaps down where you can see the nicks of the blade. And then I'm just going to paint it along the edges. And that is going to give us this really, when the light hits it, cool kind of like bladed edge, like swing, you know, cue the sound effects. And that's what I'm looking for right now. And that's, like I said, my head, he has this blade, he found it, and, well, he keeps it sharp. He keeps it sharp. Because he's a soldier orc. That's what he does. And then, once you're all said and done, you let everything dry. We're going to paint the base black on this. Now, there are other tricks you could do. You could take super glue and baking soda, and it'll give you like a dirt look to it. Just kind of like cover the base in super glue and then cover that with baking soda. And the baking soda and the super glue have a chemical reaction, and it instantly hardens. And then you'll blow away the excess dust, add a little bit more super glue and baking soda again.
And there you have it, folks. If you have a bunch of unpainted minis from old board games like I do, like this old Heroes Quest guy from the 80s, well, you can now just pull out some black paint or primer, get a quick coat of it on there, slap down that dry brush and that paint, and you're going to have some awesome things to throw on the board to just show off to your friends, family, and other people. And as you do it more and more, you can advance your technique to things like this. Man, it's a great outhouse, isn't it? All that work there, the wood texturing, and of course, well, that guy. And as you go, you'll learn to get better techniques. This particular technique, as you see, I got the tongue nice and shiny. Later video, I will show some of these advanced techniques, but for now, take that simple slap chop technique I showed you. Put it to good use. Have some fun. Craft a couple dungeon tiles and get out there, guys. Remember, thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, subscribe. It really does help out my small channel. Helps me grow, helps me produce better videos than this. Thank you, guys. Get out there and get some crafting done.